Hey everyone and welcome back. On this week's video, I'll be talking about the myth of forward head posture. Now, I know, everyone's always on their phones, checking their Instagram or LinkedIn feed. We're always kind of like staring down at it like this, even when we're walking around, and it's causing a lot of strain in the neck. It's causing a lot of migraines and headaches. Fine, except it's not the end all be all. So the reason that a lot of people will get frustrated in trying to deal with this neck issue is that the solution for from most coaches is going to be something akin to tucking the chin or packing the neck. And I admit it's something that I used to coach like 5, 6, 7 years ago. But you have to understand something about the spinal column. So when you look at it from the entirety of it, the lumbar spine, the lower back, starts off in a little bit of lordosis or extension, arching the back. This then shifts into a bit of kyphosis or rounding along the thoracic spine or around the level of the rib cage, and then it returns to lordosis or extension once we get into the neck or the cervical spine. So our necks require, they need about 30 degrees of extension or lordosis. So when we have this forward head posture and then we try to jam it back and retrude it, we're actually straightening, flattening, straightening to the point of flattening the cervical spine. And now we're jamming ourselves up in a completely different way. What people fail to realize or fail to pay attention when looking at this forward head posture is actually something that I've talked about on many of my previous videos. It's not that it's about forward head posture, it's about forward rib posture. So if I can see your lower ribs poking out of the bottom of your shirt when you're standing and talking to me at a networking event, or if I see you laying down on a massage table and I'm assessing you and I can see those lower ribs flaring out and poking out under your shirt, that means that your rib cage, relative to its original position in space, has been thrust forward. So now, the neck, the cervical spine, is intrinsically linked to the position of the rib cage. So the SCM, it's a muscle that attaches behind the ear and wraps around and attaches to the sternum. Well, it wraps around and attaches to the sternum. So the base of your skull and the positioning of your neck, as far as rotation goes, is heavily dependent on the orientation and the position of the sternum, right? So imagine if I were to just reach out and grab you behind the ear and just pull, you would do like this kind of thing, right? And that action is now being stabilized on the other end by the sternum. So the impact on the position of the rib cage is huge when it comes to neck and cervical spine health, right? So if everyone's still trying to do this, affect this forward head posture, and they're doing it by trying to jam you back in, well, your rib cage is still forward relative to what you just, how you just intervened into the system. So if you're trying to just focus on the neck up to fix forward head posture, right? You're ignoring one of the biggest inputs that leads to this situation. So we need to be able to manage a good and proper exhale, because it's those obliques that when they contract, they actually pull the rib cage back. Now the rib cage is backward. Now you can more readily go after or intervene at the level of the spine, right? Because the cervical spine is now heavily influenced by the position of the ribs beneath it. So it would be a pretty good idea, since the ribs are such massive structures with respect to the spine, with respect to the neck, if we can better manage the position of the rib cage, then once that is managed and taken care of and addressed and stabilized, it will be significantly easier than to address cervical issues like a stiffer neck, or you find that your rotation is slightly limited. Most of the time when people come in to see me and they have some kind of neck thing going on that's non-structural, really all that we do is we take care of their exhale. We manage their exhale really, really well, and we manage their ability to alternate a rib cage. So this is something I can go on off on another video, but just like your hips are designed to shift and alternate and rotate, your rib cage is also designed after this fashion. So as one side of the rib cage rotates down, the other side rotates up, and vice versa. It's almost like another pelvis. So we need to be able to allow for this shift to happen. When we are too extended within our rib cage, when we are flaring our lower ribs out, what we're doing is we're locking ourselves forward. And then if these are our ribs, it's actually very difficult for them to alternate. But now when we exhale and retract the rib cage, then we can start playing around with a little bit of alternating and reciprocal motion. Okay, so that's the big thing, is that when we're looking at the neck, when we're looking at the cervical spine, we cannot ignore the impact of the rib cage, which means we cannot ignore the impact of your breathing mechanics. So if you just breathe out, no, breathing out is a thing. Like it's a whole thing. It involves a lot of concentration and effort. So if you have never experienced what it's like to get all of the air out of your body, you need to go exploring this mechanism a little bit more, because breathing for the sake of getting lower back or neck or even knee stuff to shut down or down regulate, you're going to need to be able to dial in that mechanic. It has to be something where you can actually feel the entirety of your rib cage start to close down, right? And then you have to go from this closed down position, maintain it as you inhale. And that's a very, very complicated and in-depth procedure, but that's the only thing that's really going to get stubborn, nagging, disruptive lower back and hip issues to finally start to clear up. And now that you can take care of that rib cage position from a good exhale or good enough exhale, then it'll be a lot easier for you to influence scapula, shoulder blade mechanics, and shoulder blade mechanics. So here's the cool thing. Serratus is the muscle that pulls the shoulder blade forward. I talked about this in another video. But when we can get that shoulder blade to glide forward because of serratus influence, as that shoulder blade goes forward, it's also going to influence clavicle position, all right? And clavicle position influences sternal position. So now we have a protraction, a rounding forward of the shoulder, which is actually going to help us stabilize and reorient a sternum. And of course, as I talked about just a few minutes ago, the sternum is a major player when it comes to stabilizing the neck/cervical spine. Okay, so it's a little bit more in depth than just, hey, let's do a quick neck stretch, or let's see if we can do a little bit of rotation, or tucking your chin and packing your neck. It's a little bit more involved with that. We have to manage rib cage, which means we have to manage airflow, breathing mechanics, and we have to be able to manage efficient protraction. Because as I mentioned in the Schrodinger's cat video, most people, when they try to authentically protract, they will do one of two things. They will rotate away, or they will start to extend their spine, which is, again, thrusting the rib cage forward. So to wrap it up a little bit, it's not all about forward head posture. We have to look at some of the neighboring structures and systems that influence cervical position. Okay, so if you just look at the problem area or the site of the problem or the most readily apparent symptom, then you're doing yourself a grave disservice when you're trying to seek long-term improvement. All right. So if you guys have any questions about this week's video, feel free to drop them down in the comment section below. Check me out on my website, www.mejorstrength.com, and I will see everyone next Tuesday.